Hello and welcome to The Future of Business, the podcast where each week we discuss current business issues that will have a significant impact on the future of business in Ireland and beyond, and explore their possible consequences for people in business and for society more generally. I'm Vincent Wall, and today I'm joined by Liz Buckley, HR Director at Mazars Ireland, and by Dan Halliwell, Commercial Director at KnowHowDo, a lifestyle learning business, to discuss the topic of e-learning in the workplace. Liz, coming to you first. Can we put a definition on what e-learning means in the workplace at the moment? And how is that changing?
Well, I suppose the world of work in itself is changing, and the main driver being technology. I mean, some commentators are now talking about the fact that this is the fourth industrial revolution, with the only main difference being the rate of change itself. And a lot of workplaces are really seeing this change realised in things like how we work, and there's more mobile working options, and then also in the consumerisation of the workforce itself, this need for immediacy and accessibility. But if you think about training in itself, I remember when I entered the workplace, too long ago to mention, but when I went to enter the workplace, training would have been a select group of classroom-based courses. But now there's much more of a need for having programmes that are personalised and customised and micro-learning options. So that's where this e-learning piece has kind of come to the fore. So you'll probably find now a lot of HR and learning professionals are becoming more learning curators rather than content creators, which is what it would have been in the past.
And in an earlier podcast, we talked about you mentioned technology generally there, but we talked about the impact of artificial intelligence now on all sorts of business processes that takes the place of what humans used to do or will take the place of. And I presume that's an imperative driving constant e-learning as well.
It would be, and there's actually two interesting parts of that. I mean, first of all, I think the need to constantly upskill and having access to doing that quite easily is one interesting part. And the other interesting part we're seeing is in the programmes that are available, there's much more human touch type of programmes that there's a need for as this rise in AI develops. So the sense of communication, emotional intelligence are becoming much more relevant now with this rise of AI than it would have been before.
So in other words, the things that machines or computers won't be able to do, the bits that they can't fill in.
Exactly, that human gap.
Dan, just how big is this business, this e-learning business worldwide, and what sort of trends are you seeing?
In terms of size, we're looking at a market that just back in 2015 was worth over $100 billion, and now predicted to be $325 billion by 2025. 70% of US corporations are now saying they're incorporating e-learning into their programs, and that's predicted to get to 98% in the coming years. Video is driving a lot of that, and I think, as Liz said, personalisation is a very strong trend that we're seeing, and building programs that, I suppose, again, touch on those softer skills, and even outside of those into well-being and health and those kind of elements that employees are now driving corporations to try and incorporate into their training programs.
And Liz, are we talking specifically here in terms of the types of courses or modules that people tap into during work time? Are we talking just specifically about career development types of courses, professional development courses, or are businesses interested as well in providing a wider range of educational tools?
You're absolutely right. I think just even to touch on what Dan said about the sense of the additional soft skills, I mean, ultimately, you're looking at skills to not only allow you to develop your own career, but you're also looking for skills to meet business objectives, but also skills like mindfulness, like resilience, like this kind of a blended learning. So people have this experience in work. And what we're starting to see more and more is HR professionals trying to provide this sense of the talent experience, no different than a customer experience when you're dealing with people on a day-to-day basis. So we are starting to see much more of these blended suite of programmes.
And is there a growing expectation, particularly among younger employees, that they can tap into that during work time, or is it is it delineated towards their own time in the evenings or weekends?
Well, I suppose expectation-wise, I think most talent now would expect there to be learning and development programs. So the stats are probably around 86% of people expect that when they're coming into a new role. But outside of that, in terms of how and when they access, it's expected that it would be accessible on your mobile as you're coming to and from particular types of work, particular types of projects. But I suppose there is an understanding that if you're in work, you will be focused on work, albeit most companies do allow staff access learning and training during the course of the working day.
Yeah, and it's a good point. I think it's accessibility that's really mushroomed the market in that respect. And I think you look at phenomena like YouTube and where learning is so much more accessible in any format, whether that be career-driven or business professional-driven, but even outside of that in personal interest. And I suppose millennials now believe that they can learn absolutely anything that they need to learn just by going onto the internet, whether that's via mobile, tablet or desktop. And that flexibility to learning is really driving this program in that respect, in terms of, as Liz said, building on experiential stuff that can be done inside business, but also taking those skills outside. And a lot of the programming in that respect is being brought down in size. So we talk a lot about snackable content. Again, typically video-driven nowadays. That's the expectation. But that snackable piece of breaking down a particular subject into very small, short-form skills that layer on top of each other to then go and learn a particular area that someone is interested in, and that could be any topic. That anyone would want to learn.
To pick up on that Dan has brought up there, Liz, snackable, bite-sized pieces of information that may be needed to learn a new skill quickly, or just to allow for the time somebody has to pick up on it. But in your experience, what sort of different models are out there for Irish businesses to present opportunities to their employees? For instance, what does Mazars do?
Well, I suppose to say, first of all, Mazars has a relationship with LinkedIn Learning. So all of our staff have access to about 5,500 e-learning programs. But that's a little bit like going to a restaurant and having a 40-page menu. I mean, who's actually going to go through the full list of those types of programs? So one of the things myself and my colleague, Geraldine Lee, we looked at kind of what it is we wanted to achieve. So what were the needs of our employees? What were the needs of careers at each level? The needs of the departments? And then almost designed programs to suit that. But those programs were, as Dan mentioned, his snackable, and we call them bite-sized, but classroom-based courses that were 90 minutes up to 2-day masterclasses. And we also had e-learning courses from 17 minutes up to 88 minutes. So it's this range of and selection and suite of learning that we were trying to actually create. And what we did was we published them on a platform called Mazars U, which is Mazars University Online. But we would have had that, I suppose, relationship already built up. But there's a number of different platforms and programs that are available out there that businesses can link into. And I suppose one of the other things that we were also looking at, and certainly in terms of businesses that wouldn't have a huge budget for this area, in advance before we had run this kind of program, we would have had a number of our in-house experts putting together video content to actually share. So there are some ways, I suppose Dan might know a little bit more, there are some ways additionally that you could look at from a budget perspective to be able to still deliver the same type of content.
Correct, yeah. I think, again, businesses want, I suppose, more generalised learning in certain aspects that may be, negotiation skills, sales skills, those kind of things. But then you've got a couple of companies that want specific skills that are very, I suppose, focused on what they actually do.
Functionally driven.
Correct. And again, technology is driving the ability for companies to be able to film these courses themselves or construct these courses themselves. There are a number of different platforms or learning platforms out there where companies or even individuals can build their own courses to share their learning and their experience with their colleagues or peers or even outside of that. And so it is about that blended experience. And it's also, I think, the other key thing that technology is doing is enabling people to learn at their own pace, which is extremely important, and we know that from hundreds of years of education, that people learn at different paces in different environments and in different ways, and essentially the businesses or in this space are having to adapt to that, but the technology is allowing us to do that and really curate courses or even skill sets for individuals within a company.
For the types of courses or modules or bite-sized learning bits that are out there, Liz, how can you be assured of the quality or standard? Do you need some sort of external certification to underpin these courses? How can you be sure that your employees aren't effectively wasting their time because the quality isn't good enough?
Well, I suppose you take a risk when you attend any kind of classroom-based course yourself. I mean, that goes without saying. And, in our relationship with LinkedIn Learning, you are working with a brand that would have certain accreditation processes around that. But to be honest, outside of ourselves, we work with quite a number of consultants around the types and levels of programs that we produce and that we would have for our staff. So a lot of them wouldn't necessarily be certified, but a lot of them would be used potentially from a continuous learning program. And I think as well, just to mention, e-learning, I don't think will ever replace functional forms or standard forms. It's about just having a complementary offering more than anything else.
So it'll never replace the professional degree courses or professional certification courses that are required?
It won't replace them fully. I think it'll probably force those types of providers to look at alternative ways to learn, but it will never fully replace the requirement to have particular standards and certifications.
And I presume, Dan, like any other online service now, the ratings that people give themselves for the course that are clear and transparent to people who might be thinking of taking on that course or that hour-long module, it's probably the best way of setting a standard.
Yeah, I think it's an extremely useful way. I think it opens up, and it is, as you say, you use the word transparent. It absolutely is. Peer recommendation is something that we're quite used to now with the onslaught of social media. And courses increasingly are being rated by people who have taken them. Our courses are the same, and essentially the popular courses rise to the top, and the ones that are not so good or getting bad ratings will go down to the bottom. And I think it does for a huge spotlight in terms of someone, and even if it's someone independently certifies a course, is that really great for everyone? Whereas, when it's effectively crowd-based reviews, that often drives, I suppose, a level of certification in some respects, or what I would call social affirmation in that respect. But interestingly, if we look at outside of large businesses and look at where careers are going, if we look at the gig economy, for example, you've got things like Airbnb, Uber, those kind of things, where those businesses are based on reviews, and the performance of an employee, effectively, although they're not strictly an employee, are based on the performance of that employee. So if they're good at those softer skills, for example, they're able to present their home in a particular way, they will rise to the top and they will perform and sell more in that respect. And we're seeing that go across a number of different aspects.
I presume, Liz, regardless of how big a business it is or what area of activity it's involved in, this now enabling your employees to learn on the go and not just narrow career development courses is a critical retention tool.
Absolutely. I mean, we're finding that it is probably one of the key drivers when employees are looking to join a particular company. But what's interesting is there's actually some statistics around the number of companies that suggest they have learning and development and training programs available, and the amount of employees that actually take these up. I think it's about 71% of employers say they have a huge program available, but only about 35% of employees actually take them up on it. So that gap will probably be around waiting for a schedule, waiting for training, and these traditional types of programs. So it is a massive driver, and especially when you consider this consumerization, this need for accessibility, this need to progress, this need for immediacy, we'll have to be able to provide career paths across the board and have people access them quite easily.
Yeah, I think that's true. And we talk about career paths as well. I think, we're in a we're in a time where people are often going in very different career paths, and skill sets are often the building blocks for learning now. And because of the accessibility to be able to go and learn, as I said, these different skills, people are taking very different paths to maybe what they started off on. It's very interesting to see how people are now learning. So I worked in a number of businesses, and often things are driven by an IT department, for example. An agile process within a business has become the buzzword, and a lot of companies are using an agile process in not just their IT department, but other areas as well across their business. And that kind of two-week sprints and pushing the business forward in a short term rather than long term element. And I remember seeing many years ago our IT guys, using forums where they didn't understand a particular piece of code or a particular code language. They would go into forums where they're learning off of their peers, and they're getting advice from their peers of how to solve that. And I think businesses no longer expect people to turn up at the job and know every single aspect of what they're trying to do. Businesses like Mazars and others would realise that they're able to, that people are, and have a trust that people will continue their learning and want to naturally push their learning outside of the boundaries that they had in their formal education.
And share their own learning with colleagues.
Absolutely. One of the old adages is, if you're teaching someone a skill is as good a learning process as learning it itself.
Finally, on that note, Liz, I mean, companies like yourselves are putting the opportunity out there for people to learn what they need and what they believe will make them better people. On the other hand, does the HR department actually then have an expectation when people perhaps seek to change roles within a business, look for promotion, that they will have availed to some degree of that opportunity?
Absolutely. I think this is always a constant battle where you provide a huge amount of options and you expect individuals to drive their own career. I suppose managers, directors, partners, HR, we aren't babysitters, and it's gone past the point of waiting for a year until you have a review or you get feedback and are assigned certain courses. In us providing this, we're trying to enable and empower our staff to drive, to actually build their own career and have those stepping stones to where they need to get to, regardless if it's with us or a different type of career, or halfway through they decide, I'm a little bit interested in this, because ultimately that's where we want to be able to provide all of our staff.
Yeah, self-driven learning is one of the big trends in that respect, and I think it's great for businesses to see that. They want to see their employees looking to improve themselves, whether that and that could be across a whole range of things. That may be about their professional development. It may be about even their health and well-being, which is again a huge buzzword in from a corporate perspective, of supporting employees in lots of different aspects of their lives. As a business, we've traditionally sold our courses to consumers, direct to consumers outside of work, but increasingly we're being asked by businesses to come in and supply the types of courses that we do. So I suppose make it a part of the that engagement with an employee, that a business is there to support in lots of different aspects of people's lives, whether that be parenting or looking after their pets, or everything to flower arranging. We have over 250 courses that cover a whole different broad range of subjects, and increasingly we're being asked into rooms where we can provide that type of content to businesses that want to just widen the scope. And I think, but the encouraging thing for our businesses, if someone's constantly looking to self-learn and self-improve, then, often that's a great sign to see in an employee of that they will go long and far.
But I think even kind of further on from that, I know when you meet individual candidates coming in, one of the things you always ask is, how do you keep up to date with your chosen profession or in relation to so it is a huge, I suppose, attractiveness that somebody will take this on board and actually will continue to improve themselves, following on from that path of self-growth.
Yeah.
We'll leave it there. Liz Buckley of Mazars Ireland and Dan Halliwell of KnowHowDo. Thanks for giving us those insights on e-learning. The key messages I took were that this is with us, because not just because of the huge technological changes that are impacting business and people in the working environment every day, and the accelerating pace of that technological change, and the need for people to keep abreast of that and learn new skills and different types of skills, but also the demand from workers, employees themselves, to have convenient, easy, accessed, snackable types of learning, not just narrow career development learning, but broader life skills as well, and that employers need, depending on their resources and what they do, need to make these opportunities available in order to retain staff, but also, I suppose, to be more competitive in the business environment as well. So a very interesting discussion, and thanks for joining us. Until the next time, take care. Thank you for listening to The Future of Business with Vincent Wall and Mazars. We welcome any feedback to our podcasts, and particularly your suggestions as to topics we should cover. You can comment and rate us wherever you find this podcast or on mazars.ie. Bye for now.